I'm now asking myself why I do a thing.
We are the ones that can provide the solution to the problem.
I'm having a blast.
Hello and welcome to One-on-One at Sun and Fun. I'm Dan Milliken, and I have somebody who's never been on the channel before.
Never, not once.
Josh Flowers, Aviation 101. Josh, thanks for coming.
Hey, great to talk to you.
Always good to have you on. And, when we're talking aviation stuff, it's always good to go back to Aviation 101 in the beginning.
That's kind of the idea behind the name, right? That's what I wanted,
well,
yeah.
And let's just go into it. It's great catching up with you, Sun and Fun. You've been preaching a lot lately about professionalism. I want to know what you mean by that.
So I think when we talk about being a professional pilot, a lot of us refer to, when we say, oh yeah, so-and-so is a professional pilot, or I'm a professional pilot, we're talking about making money while you're doing it. You're a career pilot, or maybe you got your commercial certificate, you're ferrying planes, whatever it may be. Professionalism, the word professionalism, has a very different meaning to me. And I can't describe it in just one phrase, one word, one sentence, but I think we have had a lot of incidents in the last handful of years. One in particular last year, at the latter part of last year, that really got my attention on the subject of particularly flight instructor accountability and professionalism. And that's why I've been maybe not necessarily harping on it, but really focusing on it recently.
Well, we'll get to that message and what you pulled away from it, but I got to ask you this, because the video that you produced was fairly a big departure from what you normally do on Aviation 101. Were you surprised by the response you got?
Not really.
Okay.
It was pretty much what I expected. You know, as you know good and well, whenever you post a video on social media, it's kind of a toss-up, whether the algorithm's going to pick it up and run with it, or if it's going to flop. I was really hoping that video was going to do well, because it was a message that I really, really cared about.
Oh, the passion, the heartfeltness really came out in it.
That's what I wanted to convey, for sure. And it was a very different format, and I called that out at the very beginning of the video, because I wanted to make it clear to the audience, both the subscriber base as well as outside the subscriber base, which it will hopefully reach, that this is not what I normally do, and this is not going to become my normal format, but I'm going to deviate from my normal format here for a moment, because frankly, I was pissed.
Right.
And I wanted to really speak my thoughts, whether anybody thought they were valid or not. I didn't care.
Right.
I felt it needed to be out there.
And for those who are watching that may not understand what we're talking about, in case you didn't see the video, first of all, go to Aviation 101 and watch the video. But Josh, tell people quickly what the situation was.
Yeah, just a quick summarization. So the full context is in that 13-minute dialogue video that I recorded, but in summary, basically there was a student and a flight instructor on a training flight at night. They were doing night cross countries, and when they were heading back to home base, they basically picked up a pop-up IFR and ended up inside of a supercell. The airplane came apart in flight, and it was a fatal accident for both of them. Now, what provided us sort of a sight glass into the cockpit is what was the shocking part. And I'm not going to quote anything that was said, but some social media posts were documented that were from...
The flight instructor made social media posts during the flight.
During that whole evening.
Yes.
And they were posted sort of real time, even in the airplane during the accident flight, they were posted. So, in Part 91, general aviation, flight instruction, whatever it may be, we don't have those black box recorders that Part 135, Part 121 are blessed with having in the case of something going wrong. We don't have that, but this accident was extremely unique in that it gave us that sort of hypothetical black box recording.
It certainly gave you the where the head was at of the flight instructor.
It acted, these posts acted as a sight glass into what was actually going on in that cockpit. The interaction between the flight instructor and the student pilot, the dynamic, and quite frankly, the lack of professionalism and the arrogance on part of that flight instructor is what got me so angry and ultimately led to the accident happening.
All right, so let's now talk forward. What is the message you're wanting the industry to hear?
That's a tough question. You're a great interviewer. You always stump me with those kind of things. But it's really hard to put one thing on it. But what I really figured out is the one solution, because I did not really come into writing that script for that video with a solution.
Okay.
I did have advice for student pilots, and flight instructors. I said to students, don't be afraid to vet your flight instructors. Ask
Right.
around, see what other people think about them. What's their history? What's their experience? And don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Pilots, we are also ambassadors to aviation, and we need to set an example to the student pilots that we are interacting with and that are ultimately looking up to us, just like flight instructors. And flight instructors need to check their ego and hold themselves accountable. So that was kind of the advice that I had in
Okay.
that video. But ever since then, I was recently interviewed for some local news where we live, which is actually pretty close to where the accident happened. We just recently moved to that area. But I was recently interviewed for 6 o'clock news, and in the story, when she was asking me about sort of what I see the solution as, she brought up the FAA and said, well, what do you think the FAA is going to do as a result? And what's the FAA going to do to combat this? And I said, well, frankly, I don't think they need to do anything. I think we have regulations already, plenty of them that are written in blood. They're there for a reason. Regulations happen because somebody died at some point or there was an incident at some point. So I don't think more regulation or the FAA getting involved is really going to help anything. Who has eyes and ears on the day-to-day operations? It's us flight instructors. It's the student pilots. It's the pilots flying in the local airport community. So it's really up to us to hold each other accountable. And when we see that foul behavior, we need to be assertive enough to call it out. And I have a big problem with, I'm always afraid that I'm going to say something that is going to put somebody off. It's not going to come off right, or, as a flight instructor, you kind of have to figure out where your personal line is, and you just have to you don't want to be arrogant. You don't want to overstep and be a know-it-all and, constantly be telling people that they're wrong or
Right.
doing something wrong. So there's a fine line there, but we need to be assertive about, okay, I've seen that particular person exhibit that behavior 2 or 3 times, and I'm calling them out. I'm going to pull them aside. I'm going to tell them that's not appropriate. If that doesn't work immediately, then you have to go to their higher-ups and just keep going until the problem is that the threat is neutralized. Otherwise, somebody's going to die.
Right.
So safety is a huge thing in aviation, and those of us who have our day-to-day eyes and ears on the industry are the flight instructors, the pilots, and the students. We are the ones that can provide the solution to the problem, but we have to be assertive enough and accountable enough in our humility to address it ourselves.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is three groups. You got pilots, you got flight instructors, and you got students.
And it extends beyond that, of course. We
Sure.
have mechanics, we have air traffic
Right.
controllers, but when it comes to flight instruction, safety, that's the
Yeah.
3 categories that I really see
So,
there.
and in the professionalism, so the flight instructor needs to be professional, and we've got the Zeros coming over and bombing Pearl Harbor.
Sounds good, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. So we got flight instructors. They need to be professional. They need
Yes.
to honor the craft and respect the process, and that's pretty clear. Then you have pilots. Pilots need what I hear you saying is pilots need to be able to speak out and not worry about offending people.
That's part of it. That's
Okay.
part of it. I think that part that you just mentioned, being assertive and speaking up about it when you see it, I think that goes for all of them. Student
Okay,
pilots,
okay.
that's a little bit harder
Right,
because
because
you're
they don't
new.
know.
You don't know where that line is. But for pilots and flight instructors, for sure, I think the main thing that pilots can do for the industry is holding themselves accountable
Okay.
in their own cockpit and on their own flight deck. Use your checklist. Be a good example.
No matter if anybody's there or not.
Yeah, do the right thing when nobody's looking.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's for pilots. Then for students, they certainly can do their homework, and and I guess for me, I've gotten into a phase lately where, and some of the accidents I've studied, is that I think we need to give people permission to say no.
Yes.
And no.
Okay. No.
So I think that I've seen too many cases where somebody was uncomfortable with something, but they didn't say no, and it led to drastic
Right.
circumstances.
And you have to have the wherewithal and the situational awareness to know that saying no is an appropriate reaction here.
And to your point, the student needs to research the instructor, the flight school, everything else.
As
And
best as you
maybe even
can, yeah.
If they have a question because of the maybe perceived unprofessionalism of an instructor, go to another instructor and find out if it is before you blow any whistle or make any waves.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when it comes to saying no and advocating for yourself, that's really hard when you're in a situation that
You're the student.
You're the student. Yeah,
Yeah.
you are the apprentice, or you're the student. You're the one that's supposed to basically just absorb.
Don't ask questions. Learn it. Well,
To a certain extent, yeah.
to
But
a
I see
certain
what you're saying. So that I think that's the most tricky part that we can be in. But I think that really falls back on flight instructors to brief their students at the very beginning of training and hold this sort of rhetoric through all of their training that, hey, if you're ever uncomfortable with something, speak up, tell me, because I don't, as the flight instructor, I don't want to lead the student into a situation that's going to stress them out, or
Right.
obviously you're going to run into challenging situations, but I will be there to say, hey, we're going to go into this situation. It's going to get squirrely on you, but I want to demonstrate to you that it's okay in this regard, and this is how you keep control of it. Now, of course, the flight instructor has to know to not fly into a supercell.
Right.
Don't pick up a pop-up IFR at night with severe weather around you for the sake of getting through it. That's not going to end well.
No.
And that just takes experience, and you can't do that effectively if you just exhibit all 5 hazardous attitudes at
Right.
all time.
There were so many things wrong there.
There
as
were-
often is.
Yeah,
in a
this
crash.
this was not one thing that went
Right.
wrong on this crash. This was a
Bunch of
slew,
things.
a nightmare chain of human factors.
Yes.
That completely led to the downfall of the safety of this flight.
and the death of 2 people.
and the death of two young pilots, or
Yeah.
two young aviators.
It reminds me a lot of, was it 2009 in Arlington, Texas, of the flight instructor and the PA 24, 40, no, it wasn't a 48. Anyway, that went up and was doing aerobatics
Yes.
and trying to impress students.
Right.
And they ended up 3 people died in that one.
Right.
Same
So
kind of thing.
hazardous attitudes.
Yeah.
And invulnerability to the max. And then, of course, macho, trying to impress people. Like, yeah, we could go on and on about
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So it really boils down to human factors. And pilots, we need to keep ourselves accountable. Flight
Okay.
instructors, we need to be professional and check our egos.
Yeah.
And we are ultimately the ones who are setting the example for these students that we're flying with. And the law of primacy is a very real thing. The first impression is going to create like an unshakable a mold of
Yeah.
the way the student or pilot is going to remember how to do this or how to handle this situation. So if you as the flight instructor are being reckless and showing them an aileron roll, or being
what
real
they're gonna
aggressive with
remember.
your stalls just to impress them, well, that's how they're going to remember it. And that's not good. That's not what we're trying to do.
All right, great words and advice from Josh. Josh, thanks so much again for
Of course.
coming.
I appreciate
And
the invite.
Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to support us by supporting our sponsors. Flying Eyes, we're at their booth. You can use either my discount code Taking Off or use Aviation 101.
Aviation 101.
It'll get you 10% off at flyingeyesoptics.com. Also, Colton Mortgage, Colton Taking Off, 67D.com, the best mounts that you can get. Clemens Insurance, clemensinsurance.net. Z-Vision, the brightest landing and taxi lights out there, xzvision.com, and Marshall Protective Services, mpsprotects.com. They're all run by pilots. They're all in the family. Support them. That helps support us. We'll see you guys next time.